So, what has been the implications of liberalization? I am inclined to think that, again, consciously or unconsciously, there was an anti-agriculture bias of the military government. And during the decade which is just coming to an end, terms of trade were shifted against agriculture. It is only in the last 2 years after the return of a democratically elected government that much better prices are being offered, perhaps unsustainable, but nevertheless they're being offered. And I think what you're beginning to see is a modicum of prosperity in the rural areas of Pakistan. It's amazing, Ambassador, you'll be pleased to know that while our industry is slumping, electric fan sales are up by 40%. Tractor sales are up by 23%. This means that rural prosperity has taken place partly because of the massive increase in procurement prices earlier on that we announced. That must have filtered down, trickled down to an improved standard of living for at least some rural women. While urban women, I'm inclined to think, are having an extremely difficult time trying to manage household budgets in a period of very high inflation. So I think the real action in this liberalization analysis has to be on what happened to terms of trade as a consequence of liberalization and government policies. And what role in particular did the exchange rate have to play? Because somehow or the other, I think, again, with all due respect to the military government, this policy of overvalued exchange rate probably discriminated heavily against agriculture. And consequently, since a very large part of the labor force of women works in agriculture, it had a bad effect on women. And we are now beginning to redress this problem by focusing much more on agriculture and much more on women's conditions in the rural areas. The other action area in the trade liberalization context of Pakistan is, of course, textiles. And we have here, of course, the Prime Minister's advisor on textiles sitting here, Beg Saab. Wonderful that you are here. Today, that part of the textile sector, which is, if I can use the expression, female intensive, is in trouble, which is basically your value-added sector. And we have had to go to the extent of imposing a regulatory duty of 15% only a couple of days ago on yarn exports in order to make yarn more cheaply available to the value-added sector, particularly knitwear and garments and so on. So what happens to the value-added sector has crucial implications for employment of urban women. And I wonder what is happening in cities like Faisalabad and even parts of Karachi and Lahore to the prospects of women. I must say, there is literature which documents that in the following the demise of the textile quota regime and the loss of export markets in garments for some countries, we saw a conversion, and I say this very carefully, of garment workers to sex workers. And this is the kind of transition which is exactly what we as a nation must avoid. So these are some very important consequences. And let me say that I'm heartened by your concern and the fact that we have a packed house here today, fairly balanced in terms of gender, and with some of the very, very respected leaders of the female community sitting here in the front rows who have spent their lives trying to serve the cause of women. We are grateful to you for what you have done for our mothers and sisters. But I'm afraid the agenda today is very different. We are a nation which is caught in the grips of security issues. And social issues are not very high on the agenda. And what you are increasingly beginning to see is that social development is being sacrificed on the altar of enhanced security. And the tragedy is that while we may be winning the war militarily, we are losing the war on another front, which is rising unemployment, poverty. Yesterday, a dramatic suicide by a person outside the Chief Minister's residence in Punjab is a sharp, sharp manifestation of the deterioration in the quality of lives of our people. I really want to thank the Royal Embassy of the Netherlands, the ambassador and his team, for having, of Norway, for having done so much for us. Let me say that at the United Nations, and you must please applaud this, the only country in the world which has met the target of aid as a percentage of GDP being 1% is Norway. Thank you, Ambassador, and we would like to have a slightly larger share of that.
So my question is with Mr. Khan. 10 is from the government side and other are from the private sector. That is one point we have to be into your presentation, that how government is spending and why only 10% is there, while in private sector it's more than 30%. Again, there is one more which might be you have to be linked in your study is national health accounts. So we have to see that what are spendings, those are they are doing within the health system, that how they are running it. Definitely new health policy we have to be seen, because it's again in a process, and most probably the information I get that is going to be towards the legislature.
Keep your questions short, please. Or comment. Thank you. Sabir, can you wait for one or two others? And maybe there are some. Sorry, but any other questions or comments quickly?
For the ladies worker stitching. Any number of ladies with the free stitching training on the A-class garments factories with stipend monthly and guaranteed jobs. There is no fixed number, any number. We have lined up the institutions who are willing to give them a training online with the most sophisticated plant machinery. There will be a stipend about 3,000 to 4,000 rupees monthly to be paid, and then there is a guaranteed job which ranging from 8,000 plus. So I think it will help ladies.
I think we should applaud this. And hopefully the ambassador would consider putting a small part of that 1% to such a wonderful program. Any other questions? Yes?
My question is related to the methodology. You have mentioned the socio-economic status or the income group. So how, what was the basis on the basis of which you were certain that this is the poor class or the upper middle? Or thank you.
Maybe Sabir, you can now go ahead.
80%, 20%, 100%, which is called quintile in our language. So the lowest quintile I refer as a poor one. The other quintile I refer as a middle, lower middle, then upper middle, and then rich ones. Now, your question is really interesting because you are talking about the sensitivity of the different surveys and the numbers. I've worked in Ministry of Finance as well, and I also part of Pakistan Health Economics Network, where I found greater difficulty in terms of numbers. Health statistics can be number of anyone. It can be go here and there. So choosing a data set is really tricky. Why I avoid PDHS? Because it's take a long time, 10 years, 20 years. This surveys conducted by Federal Bureau of Statistics is basically quite regular. So I prefer PSLMS as compared to PDHS because for that survey, if I want to do in comparative analysis in future, I have to wait for further another 10 years. The other thing is that I am aware, as I mentioned in the earlier sense, that this study is not policy appraisal. And I'm not looking at what policy did and what are the gaps in the policies. What I try to capture basically whatever the action happened, who is the gainer and the loser of that action. That's the objective.
Dr. Pasha, I would now like to request our chair for this afternoon, Mr. Javed Jabbar, to please give the concluding remarks. Mr. Javed Jabbar.
Thank you very much, Excellency, the Ambassador of both Norway and the Netherlands. It's high time Norway expanded its territory in a benevolent way, of course. And Mr. Thordarson, Dr. Hafiz Pasha, Dr. Khalida Abbas, Mr. Sabir Rifatara, Dr. Beg, very nice of you to come, and eminent women's leadership of Pakistan. We also have a member of the National Assembly, Mr. Jaz, welcome, and such eminent cross-section of civil society. We have a room full of not exactly economists. There are some economists trying to look inconspicuous. I see Akbar Zaidi at the back, but that means that this participation is both representative of civil society as well as the large knowledge base that we have in Pakistan. It is a tribute to our country's capacity to produce intellectual leadership and qualitative research in very difficult circumstances, limited means. And I'd like to compliment Dr. Khalida Abbas for leading a very fine team of people, very dedicated. As you can see from those two presentations, I hope you've memorized each of those figures that they were supposed to be showing to you. That was the purpose. You will not be allowed to leave the premises until you've proven that you've memorized that data. I wish economists could accompany their presentation of data with some nice looking faces. They were talking about women. Would it have harmed anything if they put a face of a nice woman there? I mean, it wouldn't have been a feminist or a sexist thing. That's the person you're talking about. You're not talking about old bones or earth. You're talking about people, women. And women, the largest minority of Pakistan. The largest minority. It is. There is a leading channel which puts out a program, I believe, which I have unfortunately not yet seen, but it's called 51%, and that is based on incorrect data. As I'm sure you know, Pakistan has the dubious distinction of having an adverse gender ratio, where there are as many as 106 women to 100 men around the world generally. We have the great distinction of having only 94 women. We want to keep you a small minority, the largest minority, but still a manageable minority. But we are not alone in this. One of the provinces with the highest levels of literacy and education in the world's largest democracy next door, East Punjab. There are villages there in East Punjab where no infant girl has been born for several years because they managed to commit feticide and prevent female births. So it's not just a Pakistan problem. It is a problem in China, it's a problem in India. But in Pakistan, particularly, we should address this. It's a silent problem, and I don't say this from a very superior point of view, trying to tell you how knowledgeable I am. I am only humbly studying the census data of Pakistan. And what disturbs me is that not one but two prime ministers, fortunately not the current one, I think you better advise us, sir, two prime ministers in the last decade have taken the liberty of saying, you know, we must do something for 51% of the population. Now, if at the highest level of conceptualization or decision making, this fundamental fact is not addressed, that we discriminate against women from the moment of conception, so that we do not grant them their basic right of life, their right to nutrition, their right to legal protection, their right to education, health. No wonder we then end up with data which is of course much more specific and sectoral, as very well presented by both. It is sometimes difficult to absorb so many statistics unless you're a very specialized economist. so I empathize with you. But there were some very important core lessons emerging from both presentations. And those are very significant. And that reflects what SPDC as an organization attempts to do. And I want to pay tribute to the vision and determination of Dr. Hafiz Pasha, who in the early 1990s managed to put me on the wrong path by asking me to be on the board of directors of this body. And little bit I know how much time it would take, but it is time very well spent. It's on a regular basis. And there is a distinct change taking place. Not only in the manner in which you see students expressing their cultural or religious identity, which they are entitled to, but also in the way the lecturers and professors have adopted demonstration of religious piety as part of personality and intellectual discourse. So, at a time like this, and in a country where independent centers of thought are very, very limited, very few, Social Policy and Development Center emerging at a time when Karachi had become renowned for ethnic conflict, for danger, for peril of all kind, notwithstanding the democratic processes of the 1990s, and without wishing to pat ourselves on the backs, we were able to establish credibility. Some of them are politically diverse. Sartaj Ali Sahab belongs to another political party. Until my party left me, I belonged to another party, and so on. And we have a marvelous variety of perspectives on the board. But what we have managed to do is never allow either the individual viewpoint of the chairman or the vice chairman or members of the board to try and lead intellectual inquiry into a given direction, to favor someone's government or to favor a point of view. We have always respected the honesty and the capacity of our team of scholars. And as a result, what has happened is that over the years, even when we are very candid and critical of government policy, to the credit of governments, except perhaps once we had a terrible blemish in our record, except that one instance, governments have also looked to SPDC for independent analysis of government policy and have accepted several recommendations and prescriptions. And that shows that regardless of what party is in power, SPDC in a very humble way has tried to contribute to discourse and to policy formulation. And in this respect, I now pay tribute to the Royal Norwegian government, so well represented by the able ambassador seated to my right. It's truly very rare that you have a donor country with the sense of respect for the recipient. Donors inevitably acquire a certain arrogance, which in some cases is very visible, very crude. In some cases it's middling, because they keep reminding you that we are the donors and you're the recipients. And in others, there is a truly civilized, and not that civilization is a monopoly of the West. Civilization belongs to all of humanity, but a truly civilized approach to philanthropy. And the Norwegians epitomize this quality of respect for the recipient, that they do not make you feel excessively dependent, and that we really admire. And from that, what I learn as a member of the board of directors is the need for SPDC to very gradually but very quickly also reduce our dependence on external funding. And this is a great dilemma. To the credit of SPDC, in our kind of environment, over the years, we have actually increased our own revenue generation capacity and are therefore gradually reducing our dependence on overseas donors, so that we can be very confident when we state that we are truly independent. Though we live in an interdependent global community, the nation-state construct is necessary and it will probably last to the 21st century and into the 22nd century, dividing people on the basis of nationalisms. But really, we are part of the same single family of humanity. And in that spirit of humanity, that is how the Norwegians are so nice that they said, if we discovered oil, this is not just our property, this is part of the sacred trust of humanity. Let us share it. Let us share the benefits of this wealth with others. In Pakistan, I believe that while our people are so generous, I feel so proud to be a Pakistani because of the generosity of the people, the willingness to give to the blind, to the deaf, to the dumb, to the destitute, to the needy and the deserving. Rich or poor, the poor also give very generously and frequently. In fact, according to that survey about 12 years ago by the Afghan Foundation, it was found that while the rich give more, the poor of Pakistan give more frequently than the rich. The poor give more frequently. So it's clear that philanthropy is part of the people of Pakistan's psyche. The second, I'm not so sure, because a large part of that goes to religion-related causes. I wish, of course, I was a better Muslim. I keep struggling every day. 5 times a day I fail to be a good Muslim. But that's just 5. I fail about 15 times a day. But I do believe that we spend too much resource trying to convert ourselves into Islam. We are already 97% Muslim. And I can't accept this excessive, disproportionate allocation of philanthropy to religion-related causes. Religion is alive and well in every Muslim home. You're born with the azan, you can't forget that you're a Muslim. And one will always be Muslim. And then there's a very terrible punishment if you decide not to be a Muslim. So that's called the disincentive plan by His Majesty upstairs. So there's no threat to Islam. So the people of Pakistan, I wish, could, without becoming in any way less Muslim, consider that the third category of philanthropy in Pakistan, which is development philanthropy, which, to the credit of our people, the rich especially, they are giving generously now to schools, some of them to colleges, to medical centers, of course, they've been giving very generously, but to schools, and whether it's the Citizens Foundation or whether it's other NGOs or whatever, it's an example that development philanthropy has begun to make its place in Pakistan. But the fourth category, which should be called intellectual philanthropy, the willingness to support a bunch of crazy people who have ideas that are totally impractical or radical, and the willingness to allow them to just sit and think, do research, produce books, produce monographs. Don't criminally waste that money. Just use, and don't keep worrying, where will I get the money to pay the electricity bill. Intellectual philanthropy, which, to the credit of our favorite country, the United States of America, there is where intellectual philanthropy was truly supported at the end of the 19th century by Rockefeller, by Carnegie, by Mellon, those steel giants, those oil giants who made a lot of money illegally, but they still had a conscience. And they said the funding of universities, and that's why America has the most vigorous, most productive higher education system in the whole world. It's the most outstanding resource that America has. And that is a complete vacuum in Pakistan. Intellectual philanthropy does not receive the support it richly deserves. And we have proved time and again, whether it is the outstanding economists seated to my left, Dr. Hafiz Pasha, Dr. Khalid Abbas, several of you there, our intellectual skills, our capacity for thinking innovatively, analytically, honestly, matches the standard anywhere in the world. And I hope that SPDC's model in some small way the publication of these two utterly unreadable reports. No disrespect to them. No. I mean, they will keep me awake tonight. I got the original drafts in the non-printed form. I got them. This was this dubious privilege you have as a member of the board of directors. They give it to you at a time when you know it's the best time, at 11 p.m. someone delivered. And that's when the mind is at its sharpest. So tonight I will spend a sleepless night absorbing this data. I will come and see you tomorrow. But I think it's been very beneficial and stimulating, those two presentations. And I wish you even more success in the future. And thank you, Ambassador, for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Javed Jabbar. With this, we now come to the end of today's seminar. I would like to thank His Excellency, our distinguished speakers, distinguished members of the audience for being here this afternoon. We will now be adjourning for refreshments and hope you're all able to join us. Thank you once again for coming and have a good evening.